Roberto Nixon, welcome to Mint. Thank you for being on. How are we doing?
Dude, I'm doing well. It's an honor to be on your podcast. I'm really excited, man. Doing well. A little under the weather. I think
Okay.
it is the season. Things are
It
going
is a
around,
season.
but
I got
excited for
sick
this.
twice. I got sick twice in 4 weeks. So I respect you being here and I appreciate you being here. And I want to kick off this episode kind of just learning more about who you are, Roberto. You run from what I see publicly, very successful Instagram page, let alone a media company in Web3, the most followed and most active Instagram page covering the metaverse and crypto and all that good stuff. So that's what I know about you publicly, but tell me what I don't know about you. Who are you? What does the world need to know about you? We'll start there and we'll work our way.
Yeah, no, I would say that professionally I'm a lifelong sort of nerd. I'm a designer. I'm a gamer. I've always loved building communities on the internet. And so when I found Web3, I was like, wow, this is sort of the intersection of everything that I'm interested in and everything that I love. Which was the bridging of community, financial systems, etc. And so, I won't go like too deep, but yeah, metaverse. I got into crypto in around 2016, and that was just as I would say as a buyer of Ethereum. That's what first pulled me in. It wasn't Bitcoin, it wasn't anything else. It was Ethereum. And then in 2017, I started buying crypto kitties, and I thought that was a lot of fun. And then what happened with that is that my wallet was compromised, which is almost like a rite of passage in this game. Everybody at one point gets got. But that really discouraged me, and I went into that camp of people that was like, man, this is all a scam. This is all just grifters. I don't like that space. I left and I came back with NBA Top Shot, which is how it got me into like Web3's we know and love it today. But what I noticed was that, the same grifters, the same scams, the same bad actors were still around and even more prevalent. And so that's when I started Metaverse as a way to, kind of talk about the opportunities in the space, but also, mention the perils and what to look out for as well. And I think that really resonated with people.
So that sort of inspired the birth of that page and let
Yep.
alone the entire metaverse brand. And when you sort of kicked that off, like what was your ethos when you wanted to create that specific content? Because I noticed that metaverse creates all sorts of content, very much specific to the metaverse, but you also branch out of
Yep.
Web3, right? So when you sort of set off to build a brand into content strategy and everything in between, what was your guiding light? Like what was your initial focus?
Yeah. And so I think it's important to always adapt. And so that's what I've been sort of doing. But just to go back in time, this was August 2021 when I started it, and the content was all about education. I would say like 80% of the content was education. It wasn't so much like analysis. It wasn't really news. It wasn't the happenings. It was like educating people on how to mint an NFT, how to create a MetaMask, how to create other wallets, best practices in security and Web3, and etc. And then I started including a lot more of the news and what's happening. And early on, what would do really well is like these big sales, right? So I would talk about a big CryptoPunk sale or $1 million Bored Ape sale, and that seemed to get a lot of people interested, and that's what was working. So I'd talk about that. Um, Funny enough, it was a very, entrepreneurship, luck is always part of the equation. And when Facebook changed their name to Meta, uh, Metaverse, the Instagram page was trending at the top. So when you start typing in Meta, that was the first one that would show up. And so I remember seeing growth of like, I mean, it was like 3, 4, 500,000 followers came in just off that change alone. And we rode that sort of like algorithmic wave. Um, and what was really cool about that, I mean, it was sort of funny. I was getting like hate DMs, people thinking we were Meta, so we'd get DMs like Zuckerberg, I hate you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, hey, we're not affiliated. Right. But funny enough that's luck is always part of the equation. We were able to ride that algorithmic wave. Um, Today with Metaverse, I have sort of expanded outwards a little bit, where it's not just Web3, it's not just Metaverse NFTs. I'm also talking about general tech. I like to position it as sort of the intersection of tech, culture, and finance. So if anything falls into one of those three buckets, especially when they're all like merged together, then I like to cover that. And really, that's just for engagement, right? If I'm going to talk about like some random NFT right now, nobody cares. It's going to be crickets. What's the point? Um, so yeah.
So when you got started with Metaverse, I'm curious if there was any previous experience that contributed to today's success. Was this your first take at a media company, or were you doing this for a while prior?
No, I mean I've been building communities online for a long, long time, and not just Instagram, but elsewhere. I mean, gaming communities, what have you. But specific to Instagram, I've always had sort of this inherent understanding of content that resonates with a wider audience, especially on Instagram, because I'm like a visual sort of person. And so I had built over 15 pages that totaled 10, 15 million followers. I forget the exact number. And over the last like 6, 7 years, I'd built them. A lot of them I had since sold. There was one called Paradise that I sold, another one called Room Porn that was all about interior design, and then they rebranded to Shelter after I sold that one. And there was countless others. And so that's just something that I've been doing sort of on the side, almost as a hobby for a long, long time. And so it was very natural to me, since I've been doing it now for the better course
Got
of
it.
a decade.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
A lot of this conversation that I want to have with you, Roberto, is where media intersects with Web3.
Yep.
And the reason why I want to have this discussion, well, number one, that's what season seven's theme is by default. And number two, you're also a creator yourself. So running this entire page, and actually I've noticed that you and your team, and I don't know how big the team is very talented with kind of covering the breaking news and being first at it, right?
Yeah.
And whatever happens in pop culture, it seems pop culture and technology, you guys seem to be at the trigger finger with that news. And I'm curious, what do you see sort of like the role in media as it intersects with Web3,
Yeah.
crypto, NFTs? What are your thoughts around that?
That's a great question. So just with Metaverse real quick, the team is one. Funny enough, everybody thinks we're like a big team.
It's just you?
Yeah, and I'm out here 12 hours
Stop.
a day. All man, like the amount of work that goes into this is pretty wild. I'll eventually have to hire out, but because one of the main focuses right now is MV3, and we can talk about that later. But it's a digital collectibles project that I co-founded with my sister, and that we have like a fairly large team for, around 12 of us. But yeah, Metaverse, just me, man, and maybe that's why I've got so sick. It's like I'm always like waking up in the middle of the night, making sure I have like a chat where people are always like feeding me news and stories, and I'm able to like repurpose those in a bite size, really kind of like snackable and viral clips or content posts. But media, I feel like every company in the world is trending towards becoming their own media company as well. I think it's really important, right? And so whether you're a personal brand, whether you're a small business, a large business, an individual sole proprietor, whatever it is, it's like I think you sort of have to become, in essence, a content creator, let's call it, or but we could also use the term media brand in order to really, I'm not going to say survive, but in order to really flourish in today's age. I think media is always definitely part of the equation. And so I think that's really important, and it's been helpful as well for all my other ventures, so.
Makes a lot of sense. I'm impressed that it's only you. So you do all the editing, all the graphics design, all the publishing,
Everything,
all the copy.
Yeah, every pixel,
everything.
Every word, everything on Instagram, Twitter. I'm active now on Diamond app. And yeah, I mean, obviously, this will be expanded. The reason that I've kept it, played it so tight to the chest is because I want to really, really keep the authenticity and genuineness of the page. As soon as it becomes somewhat of a company, then some bureaucratic elements can start creeping in. And I think the voice is compromised a little bit, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And since the beginning, it's been so authentic. It's been so genuine. And it's always been, it's been consistent. And so if I start hiring out and getting other editors or, journalists, publishers, whatever it is, I'm not sure I'm ready for that yet.
Okay. Impressive. Really, really impressive. I thought it was like a whole editorial team behind you.
Yeah, man. No, everybody always thinks that. It just, yeah.
Major props to you. Major compliment.
Thank you.
So back on the path of where Web3 intersects with media. Okay. I'm a big believer in sort of, and this belief has developed over, I feel like, the last year, where there's this phrase called "not your keys, not your content." And as you build audiences on all these platforms, you actually rent these audiences, right?
Yeah.
And they're not interoperable, but we're seeing a wave of like Web3 social sort of arise. And
Yeah.
a collector equals a follower. And you can take that following and those collectors with you everywhere you go. Is this a model that you're bullish on? Do you see sort of like a different wave kind of popping up in the near future, considering what you've built so far with Metaverse? I feel like there's a lot in tandem.
It's a great, great question. I've been thinking about this a lot, and when I look at the decentralized social media landscape right now, I see so many benefits. One is you're able to own your content. You're able to own your social graph and the relationship with the audience, which I think is of utmost importance. Right now, we see with Twitter, like people are trying to like build their audience elsewhere, and they're trying to take their Twitter followers over to Mastodon, whatever it is. But like there's so many challenges to that. If you're building on a decentralized protocol, your audience goes with you, wherever you're going, because you own that social graph. And so I'm looking at social, and I'm like, there's so much that's broken with it. You're resistant to censorship. You're resistant, or you're vulnerable to censorship. Rather, you're vulnerable to getting deplatformed if you don't agree with the zeitgeist of the moment. And yeah, I just see so many benefits to a decentralized social landscape. I just don't feel like anybody's really, really cracked product market fit yet. And I'm hopeful, because there's so many brilliant entrepreneurs like playing in this space. I'm hopeful that it'll happen in the next 5 or 10 years, because the benefits just like far outweigh the cons.
Right. As an active user though, as a creator, what do you think is missing? What are these platforms not getting right just yet?
Well, there's a lot. Like one is probably the worst thing is like you're at their behest, right? Like you don't own anything at any time. You could be suspended, you could be taken off, you can be shadow banned, you can be deboosted. I mean, there's like a million different things, right? And so like sometimes that can be frustrating because say me, where I'm like working 10 hours a day, like creating content for primarily for Instagram, right? And like I don't really own the relationship with the audience. I can try to siphon them out to like email or whatever, so it's more of like an ownership thing. But that's the biggest. I would to say succinctly, I would say the lack of ownership is the biggest problem with social today.
Hmm. Hmm. I look at to the recent update from Elon Musk and the new Twitter policy
Yeah.
that he came out with that basically says like we're starting to limit other platforms capturing our attention. So no more link tree or link in bio sort of alternatives.
Yeah.
No more linking out to Facebook and Instagram. And you think about it, like what makes one platform powerful is being able to integrate with other platforms. And that may be a controversial statement, but if you look at like the early days of TikTok, like TikTok recognized that the creators have other platforms like YouTube and Instagram. So instead of trying to hide that, they amplified it and they actually dedicated a specific section on their interface to linking out to their Instagram or
Mm-hmm.
to their YouTube, right? And you see the Instagram icon or the YouTube icon. And it feels very counterintuitive to kind of like restrict users from supporting their other channels and their other accounts and their other identities online. And I feel like it builds an even stronger case for what Web3 can be and what Web3 is sort of
Yeah.
building towards, right? How do you feel about this new update? Are you for it? Are you against it? I don't know. I think it's very controversial and it stirred up a lot of noise online.
I thought it was one of the stupidest things I've ever seen. Like literally when it came out, I couldn't believe it. I thought it was like parody or something, right? And granted, it seemed like the rest of the internet sort of agreed, and it was very short lived. I think 6 to 8 hours later, they rescinded it, deleted all of those tweets. And yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, even if Elon's point was, hey, listen, like this is our platform, and if people are like promoting other platforms, somebody like made this sort of analogy to me. It's like, hey, you don't go to like you won't see McDonald's advertisements in a Wendy's or something like that, right? And so I kind of get it, but at the same time, it was like, okay, why just these specific platforms? Why not Twitch? Why not YouTube? Why not TikTok? Like, why limit it to these specific platforms? And so, yeah, man, I mean, I've been kind of vocal about this, but it seems like we've traded a small, sort of largely anonymous group of product managers at Twitter who were moderating content based on their own ideologies and biases for this, megalomaniac billionaire who is now like making rules up as he goes, depending on how he feels. And so I think there's like this small group of enemies that Elon is like battling against. And a lot of the policies that he's implementing is based on that. It's to me, it's been entertaining, but I can't say I've been a fan of how Elon is handled things.
With the rise of Web3, okay, we're seeing this new class of creators sort of emerge, crypto native creators who are using crypto to build, monetize, and own their audience. It feels very different yet similar to a Web2 creator. How do you view the differences between a Web2 native creator and a Web3 native creator?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, and it's been sort of interesting to watch because there's been a lot of, so-called Web2 creators that come into the Web3 space. And it's just like the things that work in the traditional Web2 social media environments have not necessarily translated to Web3 and vice versa. We see a lot of big Web3 creators who are active in Discord and Twitter, and then they try to go on another platform and they're not really able to accrue audience. And so there's definitely different things that work for each sort of paradigm. But mostly I would say that, listen, like creating content is always the same, right? It's visual, it's audio, and it's just about, enriching people's lives in some way, whether it's like entertainment, information, education, etc. And I think the main disconnect between Web 2 and Web 3 is culture, and just having an understanding of culture. Right. And so that's the main thing. You really it's easy to tell if somebody's not like a Web3 native sort of person or degen or whatever, just by talking with them for a couple minutes, because there is a completely different culture that has emerged in Web3. And it's hard to kind of articulate that. But if you're native to the space, it's just something like it's easy to tell.
Instagram has its own culture, its own internet culture. Reddit has its own internet culture. TikTok definitely has its own internet culture and vocabulary. How would you explain Web3's culture? Like if you had to, for someone who didn't understand, how would you take a stab at it?
Funny enough, I feel like it's gone through many iterations already. Like at the beginning, the culture was like, all right, there's this new paradigm. We're all excited about this, the advent of this technology and the opportunities behind it, and like we're all in this together, sort of, right? Unfortunately, when the bear market hit, it felt like we went from like WAGMI to war. Right now, everybody's like intimidated or threatened by other people because there's a small liquidity pool that's shrinking every day that everybody seems to be like competing for. Right. So I can understand this contentious sort of environment that has been developed. But more than anything, man, I think the Web3 ethos is just the desire to move away from these big Web 2, or let's call it like these big tech firms, right? Because when you think about it, social media is owned by 4 or 5 billionaires. Like literally the entirety of social media is owned by 4 or 5 billionaires. And so I think when Web 3 came about, the main thing is that it was like restoring power to the users, restoring power to the people. And when I think about Web3 culture, that's always sort of like the baseline, the underpinning of it is like, hey, we're in control now, not these bureaucratic or like these big tech giants.
How does Web3 restore power back to the creator?
Yeah, so I think Web3 restores power back to the creator. I always come back to this idea of ownership, right? With the advent of the blockchain, now we're actually able to own, our content, our relationships with the audience, et cetera. It's no longer owned by, these big tech firms. So as an example, if I put out a educational video, and I tokenize it, nobody actually owns that piece of content but me. It's purely decentralized. There are no gatekeepers. Unlike if I put out a piece of content on Instagram, it's truly really just owned by Instagram, and it lives by Instagram, and it's at their behest. They can do whatever they want with that piece of content without, alerting me.
So does that mean you're bullish on tokenized content and people collecting content, either paying for it, collecting it for free? Do you see that world evolving over time?
I don't know. I don't necessarily think so. And the reason why is because I've always just had this theory that like all good content should be free, right? Or not necessarily. I mean, like Netflix is great content and it's not free. I guess what I'm saying is like a lot of good educational content I think should be free, right? I've always been a big believer of like of open sourcing things. And like that's what I think is the magic of the internet, that no longer, not to go on a tangent, but like no longer do you need to go to a college to learn a particular subject matter. It's like it's all available to you on the internet through great content creators. And so it depends on what kind of content you're creating. Again, if it's like longer form entertainment content or even short form entertainment content, I definitely do think there is going to be like a decentralized Netflix, eventually. And so it depends on what kind of content you're talking about. But I definitely do think there's a world in Web3 tokenized content.
Let's talk about podcasts. Do you think it's worth collecting a podcast episode? Like, do you think,
I definitely do.
The way I think about it, Roberto, is like the same way. It's very analogous to how people, when they scroll on TikTok and they like a video and it ends up in their liked folders, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very analogous to collecting something and it landing in your wallet, right?
Yeah.
It's a very similar behavior. And I guess the real question is like, what content should be free? What content should be paid?
Yeah.
And then imagine like to actually favorite something or to like something, you'd have to pay like $1, right?
Yeah.
And then with that would maybe represent something about you online across that networking question, right? And honestly, as I say that out loud, it doesn't sound too convincing, but in the world of Web3, when you collect stuff, there is signal around that. There is a level of curation, there is a level of value of being a collector of something, right? So I'm just trying to make sense of it in the terms of what does that look like for collecting content. I believe that's going to be a next phase in the year, in the next 2 years, and we're going to see more content creators in Web3 tokenize their hours and hours of editorial work that they put into a 4.5-minute clip that ends up racking in millions of views on YouTube. Maybe that's worth collecting. I don't know. What do you think?
I think 100%, and I absolutely love it. Like, as an example, you should probably tokenize your entire podcast, and there's a couple ways to do it, right? It's like, okay, every episode could be a one-of-one token or maybe like an open edition, whatever it is. But there's a few benefits to that. One is just like the pure collectability of it. And I feel like a lot of people forget this part of like Web3 is like, hey, people love to collect, people love to express their allegiance to a particular creator, product, brand, whatever it is. And so like your fans would probably just love to collect just to have it in their wallet. Again, it's like communicating their affinity to you, communicating their allegiance to you, like all the value, knowledge, et cetera, that you've brought to them. But beyond that, why I think what you're kind of like suggesting is really, really going to take off is because people are now able to quote unquote participate in your upside, right? And so like, okay, I feel like you're the next Joe Rogan, so I'm going to buy a lot of your tokens because those will, presumably accrue in value as your career progresses, right? And so like, I think it's so much fun. I think it's so much fun, and
Sure.
I think tokenized content for those two reasons, especially, will do really, really well.
The element of open and transparent networks and secondary markets is going to enable that growth and that whole sort of behavior that we haven't seen with traditional content since 2008 when Instagram came out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the ability to tokenize your content and have the secondary market of being able to flip content, right? And for viewers in audiences, or aka collectors, as we like to call them in Web3, to have upside, like you said, as a content creator grows, as an individual grows, as their craft progresses over time. Like, I wonder if I was smart enough and aware enough to tokenize season 1 as season 1 was happening of the podcast, right? And I did that consistently over seasons. I continuously think about like, what would those be worth, or like how would the culture value those collectibles, those digital collectibles? I'm not sure, but one thing that I do want to experiment with more is tokenizing podcast episodes. I've done those in the past, and the community has tended to like it. They find this affinity and this level of alignment with it, as they tell me that this episode got me into music NFTs, and that's why I collected it. And they have this certain this connection with that piece of content. So
exactly.
Actually, why not make it collectible? But then, Roberto, I struggle with understanding like, what is the balance between tokenizing every episode and diluting the quantity of your work, right? Not necessarily the quality, but the quantity of your work, and finding the balance between issuing 25 editions, 50 editions, 100 editions, whatever it may be. How do you think about that balance? What do you think it should be?
That's a great question, because ultimately, like, scarcity and supply is key, right? And the onus sort of is on the individual creator to figure out what that balance is. Because you're right. If you flood the market, if you dilute it, it also doesn't become as desirable. And desirability ultimately is key, right? Just basic supply and demand. And so I think it's up to the discretion of the creator. But I also think there's like a really interesting, man, there's a lot of opportunity to get creative with this, right? So when I'm thinking about podcast NFTs, maybe there's like different tiers. Maybe the base tier gets you access on your website to additional content, right? Maybe like on this one, there's a blooper reel, and you can like put out the blooper reel only to the people that own that NFT. But more than that, something that I've been thinking about is like you have sponsors. I'm sure for this podcast, it's like, what if you own 5 tokens or 10 tokens or whatever it is, you get a 1-minute spot in this podcast. If you own 20, you get a 2-minute spot. If you see what I mean? And so I think there's a lot of room also to get creative with it, to generate a lot more demand for these tokens as well.
Well, that's Mint's monetization like strategy. Like I sell
amazing.
Sponsorship NFTs, right?
Yeah. Oh,
and
got it.
and brands collect my NFTs, and with that, the utility is getting access to the Mint network, right? I've done that since season 1 because I believe that you can't token gate a wire transfer, right? And it's not really a belief; it's just fact. Like you can't token gate a wire transfer, but if you have the brand collect your collectible, then they essentially buy into your community, and that's represented on chain. And then everybody else that collects the season 6 or season 7 NFTs at the end of the season for participating and listening, the brand sort of aligns with that army of listeners, And then down the line, as I figure out what the Mint network looks like, right, and I can intertwine all these touch points, these digital touch points, intertwine not only like existing sponsors but previous sponsors, because they have this non-transferable NFT in their wallet that has no secondary value, only its primary value, and see where it goes.
I love it. I think that's brilliant. And again, like that's what really excites me. It's like there's so much room to get really, really creative with it. So that's awesome, man. Like kudos to you for pioneering that model.
I appreciate it. I also want to talk to you about intellectual property. I'm curious how you see Web3 influencing and I guess revolutionizing, quote unquote, the world of intellectual property. We've seen models like CCO take into effect where anybody can promote it, copy it, whatever it may be. But when it comes to creator content, a creator might not like the use and the reuse of their content in any shape or form because of the risk that's enabled with, I guess, the detriment of a bad actor using the content, for example, right? But also having the pride and level of I guess, the pride and ownership of producing something and not allowing anyone to just remix it or reuse it, right? How do you see those two worlds collide?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've been giving it a lot of thought, and I'm just wondering how it will work. I think there's still a lot of standards and protocols that need to be developed in order, and they need to be baked in at the platform level for this to really work, right? Because no matter what, and we've tried it in music, for example, or film, what's called like DRM protection. It's like no matter what, it's still a digital file that's easily you can reproduce it, right? You can replicate it, and so it's impossible, really to prevent the use of one of your items. But through blockchain technology, like giving that cryptographic signature to verify that that's the original one, at least like it'll be easier to identify versus like, somebody steals a stock photo from a website. It's very, very difficult because there's no, there's no piece of code that's able to. So like in that sense, it might work, but otherwise I'm just not as, I feel like it's sort of impossible, to be able to prevent the replication of a digital file.
You see that actually happen often between the TikTok and Instagram war, where you see a lot of TikTok content on Instagram and a lot of Instagram content on TikTok, and there's no real way to moderate it and control it, right? So if anything, giving the user and removing those barriers and recognizing that's the default natural user behavior of wanting to treat content as interoperable, right? And just creating systems and putting systems in place to actually maybe amplify that remixability actually falls into my next question. Like, what do you see the future of content remixing look like? We see very short glimpses of it between the war between two platforms, but we also see examples of people kind of like, what's the word on TikTok? I always blank on it, but like you react to a video and it's like side by side between your profile and the video you're reacting to it. But people, like you also see it with like people like layering musicians onto a melody of a dog singing, and they add the piano and they add the drums and then they add the vocals and they have this entire band from this small ass clip that was just a dog that just hit like a C, you know, and like they created this entire thing from it. Like, what do you imagine that looking like in Web3, and how does crypto kind of maybe enable that or maybe even inspire that further, if it even does?
Man, that's a good question. You know, the first thing I got to say is like that's the magic of the internet, right? Like that open internet. I always like. I love how collaborative the internet is. It's a lot of fun. To kind of what we were talking about with Twitter too. It's like it's a shame when people try to like create like this walled garden and keep their creators inside and not let them like. Um, so how does Web3 work in this? I'm not sure, man. That's a great question. I haven't really thought about this. Like, you know,
Maybe
what block?
attribution, maybe in the form of attribution, because you can get very granular with the person who initially publishes that content and the wallet, right? That's associated with that content, being able to timestamp that day and time of when it was published and all the attributors that came with it. So doing like a splits contract, like that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah,
So
no,
you know
I
what I
mean,
mean?
here's the thing. Like everybody would have to agree to do it on chain, though. At that point,
Yes.
because if it's still a piece of content, okay, that piece of content has been tokenized, but I could still screen record it or screen grab it and then do my thing
Yes.
on top. So like I get it, and I feel like the ideology behind it is strong, and like I just don't know that it'll ever take off because again, like these are still like digital formats that can be easily reproduced, and so for that to work, like everybody would have to agree uh, to do it. If that makes sense.
And then that gets me thinking, then, Roberto, that all content should then be CCO, like by default. It should be open, it should be borderless, and should be remixable to whatever shape and form people want, because that actually makes a lot of sense. Like I'm having a realization here. Like the default human behavior is to do reacts, is to remix content.
Yeah.
Like even from Metaverse's perspective, like covering the news is a form of remixing, right? Like you take a graphic or a video and you reshare that onto your platform and you
Yeah.
add your graphic and your headlines that are catchy enough to generate clicks and attention and attribution, right? That's very much a form of remixing within itself. So it makes me think like when creators come into Web3, maybe the CCO model should apply to their content, adding layers of attribution. So who was the editor? Who are the creators? So if it's like the hype house, there should be multiple wallet addresses that's attributed to that piece of content, publishing that on chain and just seeing what happens if it's quality enough to go viral and what's that effect in the context of Web3. We haven't seen that really come to fruition just yet, mainly because platforms haven't really existed to enable that type of behavior. And it goes back to we are early, right? Like it all goes back to that. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in an ideal world, like again, just having a truly open internet where everything's CCO, but there's some like I'm not necessarily a huge proponent of CCO, and the reason why I think like brands or individuals, creators should have some sort of control over their content. Meaning, like with MB3 as an example, like we've given the IP to our holders. However, there's still certain things they're not able to do. They're not able, like they can't produce hateful content. They can't, you see what I mean? Because otherwise that's a detriment to the brand as a whole if that sort of like takes off. And so like I, as a content creator myself, like I'm always creating like short form content, whatever, me saying something like, what if somebody edited it to make it seem like I said something super nasty, like I love Hitler, like Kanye or some shit. Like I should still have some sort of control where I'm like, hey, this is not okay. You're sort of slandering my name. And so like CCO I think works for some things, but not everything necessarily, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I also think where if somebody does remix your content in a very negative way and includes hateful speech and racism and whatever it may be, you have the autonomy and control whether or not you want to reshare that, right?
Right. True.
And whether or not you want to support that. And maybe in the early stages of where we are today with like open IP and whatever it may be, the average listener or viewer doesn't understand what CCO is, and they might just think like that's attributed to the creator by default, right?
Yeah.
But in a world where
Right.
people understand the value of contributing to on-chain content, and they see the value of open IP and whatnot, maybe there may be a different perspective. But I think we're so far away from that. I like to give hypotheticals, as you can tell.
Yeah, we're still very far away, but I'm hoping that we're getting closer because, like, right now, Web3. We think about Web3. It's really just a bunch of people talking about what Web3 could become on Web2. You know, like sometimes I laugh about this. Like, what do you mean Web3? We're all using Web2 platforms. We're using Twitter, Discord. We're using Riverside to talk about. It's like, it's not. There is no Web3 really yet. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
that has like become really, really prevalent. And I would hope in the next 5 years that we move to truly on-chain platforms, whether it's social platforms, entertainment platforms, streaming platforms, whatever it is. Like, it would be great to start moving critical mass, like in a major like mainstream way, to like these on-chain tokenized platforms, because at the moment it's really just Web2 dreaming about Web3. There is no like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, to me, there's no Web3 that is like taken, even like NFTs, man. Like, what do we, you know, we're actually hold a token that just links out to a URL hosting a JPEG that actually is just loosely speculating on the ability of said brand to drive attention. Like, even then, like, we're not like, people think like, okay, I buy Doodles as an example. I don't have any ownership into Doodles. You know what I mean? Again, that's just a token
Right.
loosely speculating on their so like the entire space right now, and it's beautiful because it's like a group of tinkers and enthusiasts dreaming about what's possible. But it's like, I think we're at Web 2.5, you know? So like
Right.
Web 3 hopefully is around the corner.
There's two things I want to bring up. I want to talk about the platforms, but I also want to go back on if content should be CCO'd. Maybe the unlock, the key to remixing content in Web3 is whether or not you collect it. So if you collect the content, then you have the authority to remix it. And whether it's a free collect or a paid collect, it shows that you show some type of signal, which could also boost the creator's reach. So if you collect something, then it gets distributed to a new class of users that could collect it, just like the
Yeah.
TikTok out. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just
Yeah.
like, I'm thinking out loud here. But what if that unlock, the key to be able to legally remix content in Web3 was if you were to collect it and then you unlock the keys to remix it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so
No,
that's
I mean,
any thoughts on that? Yeah.
it's a great thought. I just think it has to be at the platform level, right?
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
if, you know, no matter what, I can still take a CryptoPunk and like remix
Right.
content around it. Even so, there has to be a platform that would emerge that would be very lucrative for a creator to be on. That would, again, like, police all of this at the platform level. Otherwise, I just don't see like a way of doing that.
And that brings me to my second point, like the platforms that actually host content, whether it be music NFT minting platforms, video platforms, social networks, it's actually all based around the financialization of the content. And I don't know if that works to our benefit or to our detriment, but when you go on Glass, for example, you don't see the view count, you see how many people collected. When you go on Sound, you don't see like the number of subscribers, you see how much revenue they generated, right? So these are new metrics to value creators, and it's a different sort of model for the end user to understand what value indicates. Because if I go on YouTube and I see Mr. Beast, 100+ million subscribers, like, that maybe sways the same sentiment of seeing Daniel Allen in close to 500,000 in revenue, you know, across all platforms. You know what I mean? Do you think about it the same way, or any thoughts around that?
You know, I talked with Nader Al Naji. He's the creator of the DeSo blockchain.
Okay.
And on DeSo, there's this app called Diamond App that I referred to a little bit earlier. And they found that, you know, like, if you can like a post or whatever, but you can also diamond it. And by diamonding it, depending on the tier, you're actually just giving money directly via microtransaction to the creator. And they found that, yes, of course, there are some like odd things about quantifying the value of a creator or a piece of content via money, right? But like, they found that it actually increases the quality of content. And the example that he uses, you know, like, a car crash is really like, you can't keep your eyes off it, you know, but you're not necessarily going to tip somebody who produces car crash videos, right? And so he's found like that the content that's getting tipped is actually enriching your life versus like this mindless kind of content that like just, you know, degrades our life on TikTok or whatever. And so just to go back to your original question, I actually think there's definitely something to it where being able to whether it be microtransactions or collecting NFTs, social tokens, whatever it is, like being able to directly, you know, give money to these creators for the content, for the value that they're putting out there, I actually think will result in much better content.
Wow, you have me in a whole nother rabbit hole here, Roberto. Trying to think, how do I get out of this rabbit hole? I want to talk to you about the media industry as a whole. Okay.
Yeah.
Media has major challenges, essentially traditional media, right? And first of all, I wonder if you could just like list a few that come to mind that maybe you most align with. Like, what are some of like the traditional or major challenges traditional media faces today? Just out of curiosity, how do you see
Well, I
that?
mean, I think the biggest challenge that traditional media faces is, I mean, it's twofold. It's one is like you need to generate clicks, right? Ultimately, a media is a business. These aren't, you know, nonprofit sort of altruistic ventures or endeavors. These are businesses. And so you need to generate clicks. And generally what happens is, this is why we see so much fear. I call it like fear porn or like tragedy porn, where somebody shoots up a school and it's like, this is all they talk about because it generates so much clicks. And so that's the biggest challenge with media. It's like we often see sort of like these mindless, viral worthy stories that everybody's talking about, instead of like true quality, substantive stories, just because it generates clicks. And again, the other problem is, again, because it's a for-profit venture, usually media or the sentiment that they're propagating is up to the highest bidder, right? And so these are the two biggest problems that again, I don't have like the answers for them. I think it's just it's like just human nature. But you know, these are for-profit endeavors, and so they're often compromised. Like their integrity can be compromised for, you know, for the almighty dollar.
So in the primitive of clicks, attention, bounce rates, all these
Mm-hmm.
web-based metrics that we use to measure performance, right?
Yeah.
How does Web3 change that? How does Web3 challenge that? The first thing that comes to mind is we're no longer maybe building for quantity, we're building
Mm-hmm.
for quality. So
Yeah.
the same value maybe that 1 million people can produce on Spotify, 100 people can generate through music NFTs by collecting an artist's work,
Yeah.
right? That's like the first thing that comes to mind, just remixing what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anything else comes to mind in terms of the traditional problems that media faces, okay, that traditional media faces, and how Web3 sort of takes that on itself, right, and attempts to solve that? Anything else
I,
come to mind?
I think it goes back to what we were saying, where it's like direct monetization of the content will really work. Look, there's two names that come to mind. One is Zach XBT. You're probably familiar with him, right? The on-chain sleuth. And another one is CoffeeZilla on YouTube.
Okay.
Both of these guys, they produce incredible work. And it's like Zach XBT is donation only. That's how he makes his money. So there's no, you know, like he can't be compromised. His journalistic integrity cannot be compromised. And he does really well for himself because it's the users, it's the people who are financing him, right? Same as CoffeeZilla. And so to me, it's like in this Web3 world where we have these platforms where via tokens or via microtransactions, people are being rewarded for the content they put out. Some of these journalists are going to produce phenomenal work that is detached from the ideology or the agenda that their superiors are trying to push out, just because they're now work for the people. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. That does make sense. Who was the other guy you said? CoffeeZilla?
CoffeeZilla, dude, is the best YouTuber in the game right now. Like
Is he? All
he's like
right.
a Zach XBT where he keeps like all these scammers honest, you know, and he like calls out scams, and like his work on Sam Bankman-Fried has been phenomenal.
Mm,
I think he's like the biggest crypto YouTuber in the world right now. It's
really?
incredible. Yeah.
Wow. How have I never heard of him? All right. You put him on my
You've probably
radar.
seen his
I'm
stuff
here.
though. You've probably seen his stuff.
Okay, probably like these micro clips trending on Twitter,
Yeah,
probably.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I want to hear from your perspective, Roberto. What am I missing? What don't you think we're covering in this discussion that's prevalent to where Web3 intersects with media, where Web3 intersects with content creators? I'd love to hear from you, like any thoughts that are just lingering in your head that I haven't had the opportunity to ask yet.
You know, it's the one thing that I keep thinking about is how difficult it's going to be, because it's truly an uphill battle for all. Because like Web3 with the ownership structure and with everything else that we talked about and all of its upside and all of its potential, it's still going to be difficult to break the network effect of big tech. Right? It's still, even if you create the most incredible decentralized social platform that unlocks so many benefits for a creator, it's like, how do you get people off of Instagram? You know, how do you not only onboard creators but also retain them? And you know, like it's truly $1 trillion question, right? Because these social behemoths have like market capitalization of like $1-2 trillion when you put them all combined. So it truly is $1 trillion question, but it's an uphill battle that's going to be, you know, nearly impossible to break. But I'm hopeful. Again, there's a lot of savvy entrepreneurs building here. But yeah, that's what I would say is like, in, we love to sort of, fantasize about this future that decentralized technologies unlock. But I think the main question we have to start asking ourselves and really start talking about is like strategies, the how we're going to break the network effects of big tech.
How are we going to do it? What do you think is the optimal way?
Yeah,
If you were given the responsibility to figure it out, how would we do it?
That's a great question. Again, it's literally $1 trillion question, right? And so I actually posed that question to Nader Al-Naji, and he was like, "Listen, just little by little, what the blockchain does unlock is like, again, like really creative ways to financialize systems, right? And so here's what it is ultimately. Like, social media is a status game. Social media is an economic game. How can you make decentralized social platforms, or like Web3 social platforms or otherwise, how can you make it more lucrative in terms of yield, in terms of money, in terms of status, in terms of eyeballs for creators? How do we get there, man? If if I had the answer to that question, I'd be in a yacht somewhere, and we'll see.
All right, maybe one day we'll get to that yacht.
Yeah.
But before we do that, Roberto, I want to thank you for being on. Appreciate you taking the time, considering how you're feeling and under the weather you are. You killed it. Epic episode.
No, thank you, man. Yeah.
Before I let you go,
102.7 is my temperature right now. So.
Oh my God, I thought you were about to hit me with 102.7 Kiss FM.
I know, right?
But I'm here for that too. Where can we find you, Roberto? Where can we learn more about Metaverse? Chill it away, and we'll wrap it up.
You can find me on almost all socials. RP Nixon, NICKSON, and then Metaverse is the first E is a 3 on Instagram, and then it's on Twitter. It's the Metaverse because there's, I think that it's like a squatter on the whatever. And yeah, man, that's those are. Twitter is like primarily my thing. Okay. So RP Nixon on Twitter is where you can find me.
Amazing. Roberto, feel better. Thank you for being on. We'll have to do this again soon. And then, until next time.
Anytime, man.